Good morning. I'm Tristan Winder. Glad to be back in the News 2 streaming studio with the Morning Pulse here on this Thursday, February 27th. We begin with a somber anniversary as Monday of this week marked the 3-year anniversary of Russia's invasion on Ukraine. The war-torn nation is once again in the spotlight as President Trump pushes for peace talks. However, a former Nebraska lawmaker who has frequently traveled to Ukraine is questioning the cost of imposing peace.
We have a place and a responsibility to continue to help Ukraine. It's just, what does that look like, and will we do it?
Tom Brewer was a state senator for 8 years representing Greater Nebraska and spent the last 3 years as an advocate for an envoy to Ukraine. The lifelong Republican is pushing back against some recent comments from the Trump administration. He spent the last few months in D.C. pushing for long-term security guarantees for the country of Ukraine. Back here on the home front, we continue following multiple fires across central Nebraska, specifically north central Nebraska. The Broken Bow Fire Department and other agencies tirelessly working a trio of fires that ignited since Monday. Investigators say those fires have burned 900 acres, and two of which were 30% contained earlier today. A third fire was about 70% contained earlier today and has claimed 2,700 acres. More than 100 volunteer firefighters have been helping by using single-tank engines to drop water and fire retardant at the area. The Nebraska Forest Service says 90% of these fires in Nebraska are human-caused, and the number one cause is unmonitored debris burns.
We saw a warm-up last weekend, and typically what comes with that is folks are looking to burn debris piles, slash burns, things like that. This is all debris that was accumulated in the winter, so there wasn't nearly as much moisture in the ground. Now what we're seeing is, folks started these burns. In some situations, they thought they were out. What happened was we had this unseasonably warm temperatures, we had high winds hit the area, and some of those burns actually started back up.
That's Benjamin Boha, Public Information Officer for the Nebraska Forest Service. He says that debris will continue to be a problem, sharing that it's important to watch what fires you start after getting a burn permit. As with the current conditions, a fire can get out of control awfully fast. And Nebraska coming together to remember a state trooper killed on the job just last week. Trooper McKay will be laid to rest today after a snowplow struck Trooper McKay when he was responding to a crash on I-80 earlier this month. Colleagues remember Trooper McKay for being outspoken. They remember him for his sense of humor and willingness to help others. Colonel John Bolduc of the Nebraska State Patrol met Trooper McKay back in 2017. He tells us that it was a challenge for law enforcement officers to connect with people. But he says Kyle had a different way of getting to people. Donations are being accepted on Trooper McKay's behalf, and all funds raised will be donated to Children's Hospital. We do have coverage of Trooper McKay's funeral and procession happening right now at knopnews2.com. In other Nebraska-wide news, jury deliberations started this morning for a manslaughter case against a Nebraska doctor. Dr. Mark Carlson of Omaha is accused of racing another driver on Dodge Street in Omaha in September of 2023 before losing control and slamming into another car head-on, killing a 22-year-old instantly. For Wednesday's closing arguments, the defense argues that Dr. Carlson passed out while driving. A former engineer for Ford Motor Company says the crash data shows that lane assist in Carlson's Mercedes was turned off, and he was in fact steering the car moments before the crash. State lawmakers are considering a new measure to increase protections for meat and poultry workers. This was first reported by the Nebraska Examiner. LB 573 requires certain ag operators and operations to have disaster mitigation plans for workers and food supply. It calls for full worker compensation and for illnesses at larger industrial operation during animal disease outbreaks or weather disasters. The bill's sponsor believes that these challenges and these changes will protect the workforce and the food supply chain, also help make eggs more affordable in the future as well. And in national news, well, I guess you could say global news, rather. Happening today, the White House is preparing for a visit from one of the country's allies, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. It comes weeks after President Trump sent shockwaves through Europe with comments made regarding Ukraine. So the sit-down, definitely something that has global and national implications as well. So it's going to be quite interesting. You can stick with News 2 for additional details, developments, as well as this day progresses and these conversations progress as well. Rounding out the morning pulse with a check, the 7-day forecast. My goodness, it feels awfully good. We're getting a touch of spring, but hang on, that could be a little bit different early next work week when we do have chances of moisture in the forecast. We could use a little bit of moisture, though. Drought conditions typically don't get corrected during the spring and summer months. It's typically during the winter when we see that drought correction, so definitely welcome some of that moisture. And I would think, I'm no meteorologist, but I would think with as warm as it's been recently, most of that would come in this form of rain, and even if it did come in the form of snow, it sure wouldn't be sticking around with how warm it's been and how warm that ground is as well.